Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Manners, and I'm just getting dressed for the fourth day of the day-night test. Oh, no, I'm not. It's over again. It was over on the third morning for the second year in a row. I've got a couple of spare days in Adelaide, and I'm joined to go through all the news from the second test by Daniel Beswick from the Emerging Cricket podcast. Daniel, did you enjoy the test match on the telly?
Yeah, Menace, it was good. I missed actually most of yesterday and sort of caught up on the channels just to watch the dismissals and see us get home in the end. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed days 1 and 2 from home and into the middle of the night here in Sydney. It was enjoyable, good sort of gripping Test cricket, I suppose, in some parts, mostly Australia's way, obviously, given the result. But yeah, good to see them finish off from an Australian point of view, finish off yesterday. What have you got planned for the next couple of days, Manners?
Going to do a bit of walking, a bit of shopping. Yeah, I was hoping the test would go 4 days, to be honest. I sort of thought when I booked that it would be unlikely to go 5 days unless there was some rain. But yeah, I was pretty surprised that India capitulated so quickly in the second innings. Don't even think they batted 40 overs in the second innings. And yeah, it was a very quick finish. And I've got a question for you, Daniel. If I'm the BCCI, and I said this on the wrap, why the hell would I agree to playing another pink ball test on the next tour here? You've been beaten on the third morning the last two times. India never play against the pink ball. And Rohit Sharma, in the lead up to the game, was he wasn't critical of the pink ball at all. He just said, we'll play what's in front of us. But if I'm international touring sides, I am starting to feel that it's a bit of an unfair advantage for Australia.
They do have a precedent, obviously, of opposing it. They took a long time for them to sort of get on board themselves. I think the solution is probably now. You've already agreed to come and play multiple pink ball test matches. It's probably a case of actually selling a pink ball test to your own crowd in your own on your own turf and playing more pink ball cricket that way. I can't see why they can't introduce some more pink ball cricket into Ranji Trophy stuff. I'm not too sure what the situation would be in terms of facilities in different places to host that type of cricket, but it's not like they haven't hosted pink ball test cricket in India either. So it might just be something on their calendar to look to do. I think in some ways their crowds and they're struggling to bring crowds in for test cricket in comparison to, say, their IPL product probably stems from the fact that people don't want to come in during the day, and there might be scope for them to actually play more pink ball cricket, which in a roundabout way should actually help them every time they come out here and tour and play a pink ball test match in that way, I'd say.
That's a good thought. If they were to play more in India, then Australia's advantage would be lessened. I heard Ravi Shastri discussing that there are issues with, the pink ball being used in India, which it probably behaves a little bit differently to it does in Australia. Anyway, just a thought. Australia's perfect record in Adelaide pink ball test continues 8 from 8. I guess the big news to come out of day three's play, and it happened after I recorded the wrap, was that Travis Head and Mohammad Siraj have both been charged by the ICC for a breach of conduct. We haven't yet got the results of that hearing or the investigation, but both those players have a pretty good record. Neither of them are in any danger, I would imagine, of being suspended for the next game. It'll just be a rap across the knuckles and don't do it again kind of thing. And we saw towards the end of the game, Travis Head and Siraj talking out in the middle, and allegedly all it was a misunderstanding between Siraj and Head. That's the way it came across to me. But I do think, I don't know if you remember from the Perth test, Daniel, but when they got Travis Head out in the second innings, I mean, they were all yelling at Travis Head's ear. Kohli was almost barking like a dog, like David Warner used to do when Head was out. So I think that kind of irked Head probably in Perth, and there was a bit of a build-up to this game. So, yeah, I don't think there's much in it. And I sort of said at the time, I did get a bit uneasy with Travis Head taking the sort of moral high ground after playing the second day. I think you leave yourself open there when you do that. But yeah, what did you think? And do you think there'll be any sanctions?
Yeah, maybe the adrenaline was still running there. And that's
Mm.
why sort of Travis tried to take that sort of stance. I liked it, to be honest. I think we kind of contradict ourselves in the media a little bit sometimes, don't we, when we say that, oh, we want some more personality out of these guys, and then we end up getting a really sensitized version once they're fronted up to us. I thought it was sort of a heat of the moment thing. I mean, Siraj has sort of cleaned up someone's pegs. He might not have even sort of looked up at the score and actually saw what Travis Head was on. Like a lot of the takes being sent around, well, he's on 140. Why are you trying to give him a send off? I don't think it was entirely like that. Siraj is a fiery guy, and he's just, while he doesn't have a record against his name, he is a guy who likes to say a lot and is outspoken. And to be honest, I think really when you take that wicket into context, I mean, he made 140, but between the rest of the Aussies, only made 190 between them. There's every chance that if you can sort of grab a wicket there and you take a key man, you can try and swing the momentum back in your favour in that moment. I know that they were a long way behind in the game at that stage, but you're looking to cling to find anything you can. And for Siraj, look, if I'm in the same boat, I'm probably doing the same thing. I'm probably not launching into expletives and starting a verbal stoush with Travis Head, but I could see where Siraj kind of was in that regard. And I think people probably made it out to be a little bit bigger than what it actually was.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see what the ICC do with that. I mean, we'll get on to some of the pros and cons for both teams looking ahead to the second test. But the other thing that really came out to me, and I've sort of slept on this a lot, was the reaction of the Aussie team to the criticism after the first test is quite different to how it has been in the past. Normally, the teams under Pat Cummins are very calm and seem to be in a good headspace, but there was a lot of pointed comments during this test match. It started with Stark on the first day to the media about all the noise coming to the room, and then finished on the last day with Marnus saying, "Oh, last week we were the worst test team in the world," and no one said they were the worst test team in the world. And I sort of, I think if you're the Australian team and you get spanked by 295 runs, you've just got to expect some kind of criticism, and to sort of have this siege mentality against the media that they're all after us is crazy. I mean, the media are just making very valid points about the weaknesses of the Australian top order in the last 12 months. The stats are all there to see. And, just strange that the Australian team would react like that. And it does make me sort of think that, this team is in transition and there's an insecurity there now. And it's coming out with this reaction to the criticism, but they better go on with it now. Like, if you're going to come out and be all cocky after one test victory, don't fuck this series up.
I think most of the discourse that I saw out of the first test was more than fair. I don't mind that the Australian team have kind of used it as their team talk to basically pump themselves up and win, but I don't think it's also worth them coming back and saying, well, look, we've shown you what we can do, because, the series is still 1-1. And if you take this pink ball sort of variable out of the contest, we go up to Brisbane and there's no guarantee that Australia wipe India out completely up there either. Of course, India won the last time we went up there. I know that the factors are completely different this time around, but I mean, we're back to parity now. It's a best of three, really. So I don't think there's really a leg to stand on by coming out and saying that. We know that they're good, but again, it's with the added caveat that, yes, it's a pink ball test. We're in Adelaide where the record's good, and we still have to, from an Australian point of view, you have to go out and win 2 out of the next 3 test matches if we want to win the series. So I don't think anything's been properly proven yet. I think that they've shown what they're capable of. But look, if I'm India, I'm not particularly worried about losing the Adelaide test. Quite frankly, I think Rohit Sharma and the team had probably conceded, look, we're going to drop one of the first 2 test matches anyway. Let's just make sure that we're not broken by the time we get to Brisbane. And that's where they're at the moment. If I'm India right now, I'm not too worried about the position that I'm in, quite frankly, because, you'd much rather be here and fighting and knowing that you've got the pink ball test match out of the way.
Oh, absolutely. And you're right. India, if they'd said, if they'd been offered 1-1 after Perth and Adelaide, India might have taken that. I mean, they're two of Australia's.
They definitely would have.
Yeah, so I mean, this series is still, very much in the balance, and no one's really yeah, I just think Australia's got a long way to go. The last two series here have been 1-1, and India have gone on to win. We're going to get into more favourable grounds for India. The support for India at the MCG and the SCG is going to be next level. So, yeah, there's a long way to go. The other point I wanted to make was, and I spoke about this in the wrap yesterday, but Pat Cummins saying that he felt he bowled, he was happy with his bowling in Perth, and again, just deflecting any responsibility for not being cherry ripe for the first test match. It was very strange comments because, Daniel, there is no other way to spin it. Pat Cummins looked like a different bowler this test match.
Yeah, I liked the plan even on day 3 early, going to the short stuff and bouncing players out. I thought that was a good tactic even when the ball was a little bit older as well. I think I agree with you. I can't see the argument from Pat Cummins' point heading into that first test and watching him bowl. It did look a little raw, a little all over the place. And the thing that makes someone like Pat Cummins really good is kind of having the Josh Hazlewood idea of looking to hit the same spot 6 balls in an over with the occasional bouncer, maybe once an over, once every 2 overs. It's not like a Mitchell Starc thing where you go with the chaos that ensues with the way that Mitchell Starc bowls and the quote unquote inconsistency that he might perceivably have. Pat Cummins is the type of bowler who needs to be consistent and needs to be on his spots at basically at every point just to keep harnessing that pressure. So for him, it's all about rhythm. So for him, I think you're right, especially Pat Cummins in the way his game is built, the way his bowling's built. I think you're right. I think that we can look back in hindsight and say that, yeah, that probably wasn't the greatest sort of decision in terms of a management situation.
I guess he's reticent to come out and say he got it wrong, his build up to the first test match. But I also think a good leader, a good captain accepts when they made a mistake. But really, he just doesn't want to play Shield cricket ever again because, if he admits then he got his build up wrong to this test series, then that means next year he'll have to play a Shield match. And I think he might feel he's too good for Shield cricket now. His time's probably too valuable to be wasted on a Shield game.
No, I think that, with all due respect, that really should be nonsense in the way, and I know you agree with that statement, but I think it's unthinkable that you can come into a test summer and not play a single red ball, no matter who. I don't care who you are. I think that first test should be the precedent now going into next summer. We've got an Ashes next summer as well. I think people need to remember this. Like in the next 3 test matches, we might win 4-1. Let's say hypothetically we do win 4-1. I don't think we do, but let's say we do win 4-1 and we come to next summer and we forget all of this. And then there's players who decide to pull out of playing red ball cricket in the build up to the Ashes. It should be nonsense. We should use that Perth test match as precedent to say, look, we saw what happened in Perth. We got completely ambushed. And quite frankly, it was because you didn't get overs underneath your belt. And by contrast, the players who did play a little bit more red ball cricket had a little bit more success. The likes of Head, the likes of Line in the first test, and I really wasn't used in the second.
Hazlewood, he played a red ball game.
And he was excellent in the first test. He was probably at the pick of the bowlers, at least from a miserly economic standpoint, which is what Cummins should probably strive to be as well. So, yeah, let's make sure that, I don't know, it's weird that we're kind of getting on the grandstand and yelling this as well, but this just proves the point that we're trying to make. You need to get 30 overs of bowling in across 2 innings, maybe 25. Like, it doesn't have to be a lot. Just get into the repetition of bowling. I know bowling in the nets, you can kind of transfer it a little bit better than, say, batting in the nets in the middle, but I still don't think there's a substitute. I think you need to go out there and actually see the outcomes of your actions bowling in the build up to a test series. Yeah,
the intensity in the nets can very rarely replicate out in the middle. And we saw it with the bouncer tactic on day 3 where Cummins attacked the Indian tail with short balls. Why didn't he do that in Perth? Because he probably didn't feel he was physically ready for it. So, anyway.
And it made more sense in Perth. Yes. It would have made way more sense in Perth to actually do it as well.
Yeah. I'm banging on about this for a couple of weeks now, but, Pat Pat Cummins is starting to annoy me more and more because I think he's lost touch a little bit in the last few years, and this is where I think the Australian team is in dangerous territory. It was kind of just before Sandpaper Gate where they sort of lost touch with their privileged position as the Australian cricket team. And again, you just saw it with their reaction to the first test. How dare you criticise us? How dare you criticise us? We won a World Cup and a World Test Championship. They kept telling us about their success. Well, I was saying to a few people, in this World Test Championship cycle, they haven't had a lot of success. It's been fairly successful, but, they didn't win. I'm not going to go on about it. I've been going on it for too long, but it just pissed me off.
I think there's a bit of an Icarus thing here, right? Where we're just a little bit worried that he's flown a little bit too close to the sun. And we want him to he's only 31. I mean, he's a younger of sort of the rest of the bowling attack. So there's more scope for him to really close out and mark his own legacy, actually bringing through a transition of players himself and actually still potentially being the captain of the team in that all the way through that transition. So, yeah, I just think, the longer this goes and maybe this is the moment, hopefully, where someone sort of turns around and says, maybe not pull your head in, but like just kind of really appreciate the situation you're in. You're the Australian Test captain. I know that people are trying to pursue other things, but that's your thing. Like, you're one of one, Patrick. Like, just make the most of the chance. You're only going to be this old once. You might as well sort of push as hard as you can to close out and then sort of ride off into the sunset once the career's done and dusted. You can go watch Coldplay wherever you want.
When you finish, you can watch Coldplay wherever you want. Yeah, but I heard, and I said it on the wraps, I heard a lot of mail that the Aussie team's angry about the reaction from the first test. So, look, if that fired them up, thank you, Manners, for firing up the Australian cricket team. With the World Test Championship, so good results for Australia over the weekend. New Zealand being beaten by England has meant that Australia are now on top of the World Test Championship ladder, and they still have a good chance of making the World Test Championship final. The fact that New Zealand lost and Sri Lanka lost to South Africa means that Australia have a pretty good chance, but I still think, there's some drama yet to go in this World Test Championship race because Australia's last two tests in Sri Lanka being played at Galle. There's every chance Australia lose both of those on spinning Cobra turning tracks. So, but the results in the other games have left the door open for Australia. If they can finish at home strong and go on and dominate the rest of the series, maybe it won't matter so much what happens in Sri Lanka. I think Sri Lanka have to beat South Africa in the second test of their series to keep their hopes alive. So, Australia in a good position. If they can win this series, say 3-1, that should be enough to almost get sort of 1 foot in the final.
Yeah, it really should. And we might need a favour from South Africa just to make sure that they get over the line in that second test. They've obviously got a lot to play for as well in the context of the competition as well. So it's not like they're going to be tanking or anything like that. All roads seem to lead to an Australia-South Africa final, which would be great. I think that South Africa deserves a chance. They've been consistent over the last couple of years. They've got a great bowling attack who should really enjoy Lords. I think it'll be a cracking test match if we get that neutral fixture come the end of the cycle. Sri Lanka, of course, you made the point that, especially in Galle and in home conditions, have been impenetrable almost. If we can eke out maybe a draw just to really just cement our spot from an Australian point of view, it should be fine. But from an Australian point of view and in the context of the cycle, I think the guys are keen to go and defend their crown. And I think they'll know that they'll really want to close out in Australia and not have to worry about going to Sri Lanka to pick up any particular points. But the New Zealand drop points in their test series, plus the points deduction, sort of throws them out as well. So it's basically become a 4-team race. If India can somehow sort of sneak through, I doubt that it's possible with them only playing sort of away from home now. So, yeah, looking forward to the race. And I think it does point towards a South Africa-Australia final.
I really like the World Test Championship I think it's done a lot for Test cricket. I think it really has invigorated the game. It gives a broader context for all the games, which is why I found Ben Stokes's comments
Oh,
last week mystifying, where he said he doesn't even look at the ladder, he doesn't understand it. I mean, what a flog. I mean, this is the captain of the English cricket team completely talking down the World Test Championship, all because they haven't been good enough to stay in contention. I found that galling, Daniel. Like, the English captain has, again, a bit like Pat Cummins, has a place of privilege in world cricket. You cannot be that disrespectful to the ICC Test World Championship. And if I was the ICC, I would be furious at those comments by Stokes.
he made comments about the overrate thing, not knowing the rules around the overrate penalties as well, which is just perplexing. I mean, this is a guy who this is the one thing I absolutely detest in any walk of life is you almost being proud of your poor knowledge and your ignorance towards something. You're the test captain of England. Could you just imagine if NASA or Athers or someone was like this if there was a World Test Championship? I mean, at least they would sort of fall on their sword and say, look, we just weren't good enough to be in the race because quite frankly, that English team, quite frankly, wasn't sort of good enough to be in the running. I mean, the way that the format is, the way that he explained that he doesn't understand the format, it's not difficult. You just try and win as much as you can. And it's just about the possible points that you can collect from all the test matches you play. And there's actually an advantage for England because they play more test cricket than anyone else, and they play more test matches at home than anyone else. They could play 6 test matches. They could play 12 test matches in a cycle at home across 2 summers. And the way that English team is built, there's no reason why they can't win 8 to 10 of those test matches. There's really no excuse for them to not be in the running for a World Test Championship final every single cycle. The teams that should have that should be arguing about the format is the teams that don't play as much. I mean, yes, sure, you only need to win a possible percentage, but if you're South Africa and you lose 5 test matches out of say the 10 that you play, then you're cooked. But
You're gone, yeah.
But the other by contrast is, look at where South Africa is now. They're the ones who should be crying out to play more Test cricket, and they're looking to be in the World Test Championship final at this point. So, look, if he was captain of South Africa, if he was captain of Bangladesh, if he was captain of a team that didn't play a whole lot of Test cricket, I could almost get behind what he's saying. But the cards are pretty much stacked in your favor to get there, no matter what. And your ignorance and negligence has ultimately probably cost England a spot in the World Test Championship. Don't go blaming anyone else for your problems, mate. They're your problems.
Yeah, and also just give a professional answer. Say, we would love to win the World Test Championship one day. As you say, we haven't been quite good enough in this cycle. You can laugh off and say, I don't really understand the points very well. I'm not good at maths. But say, we're still aiming every 2 years to be there at Lord's and winning in front of our home crowd. And for him just to casually dismiss it is disrespectful to former winners, disrespectful to Test cricket.
We're in the third cycle of it, Menas. It's not like this is new anymore. This has been around for ages. And again, they play more Test cricket than anyone else. If anyone should know the format, it should be them.
I heard a scurrilous rumor about Ben Stokes recently, and these are completely unfounded, but I'm going to put it out there anyway, and you be the judge. Allegedly, he was the one that broke Johnny Bairstow's leg. He tackled him on the golf course and snapped his leg, and it was a complete cover-up. Now, I don't know if this is a bit of a tall tale being thrown around the cricket world, but I have heard it from pretty good sources. So if I'm Ben Stokes, I would worry more about not breaking your fellow players' legs than criticising the ICC for the World Test Championship, because it's pretty easy to get around, understand, it's a percentage of games you win. I think, you can sort of go into most junior schools in Australia and tell people in year 6 how it works and they get it. But anyway, look, just be careful if you're playing golf with Ben Stokes and you're in his team, because he might snap your leg. All right, we're going to take a quick break if you're listening on the podcast, and then we're just going to talk about, what are some of the talking points that come out of each team from the second test. You're listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Manners. I'm with Daniel Beswick. So, Daniel, lots of good things for Australia. Let's go through the order. So, I think McSweeney looked good in that first innings. I thought that was I think it's not underrated because people have talked about it, but him getting through that first night with Marnus Labuschagne was very, very good. He got a good ball on the second morning, so I'm really happy with that. And also Marnus looked very good in his innings, especially on that second morning, started to play more fluently and back to the Marnus of old. When you see him play the way he did off his legs, I think he's in good form. He's holding his shape, holding his balance. His head's not falling over. So really good from those two. Khawaja, though, what concerns me is his catching at slip. He dropped one on the first day off Rahul, I think it was, and he just looks a yard behind at first slip. So I hope that's not an indicator of him sort of losing his edge, but I'd be taking him out of first slip.
Yeah, I saw that. It's kind of a law of averages thing, right? It's like how many other players are taking that chance in that situation. I do tend to agree with you. I think there will probably be a discussion around that. I think that given that McSweeney's come into the team and has found himself in the cordon already, probably tells you that things are a little bit sort of raw in that regard. I mean, Davey Warner was a player who was obviously in that position, so it's tough to adjust. And given it's a pink ball, you might sort of probably cut him a little bit of slack in that regard as well. I probably wouldn't change anything until we saw something particularly bad in Brisbane at this point, because I just don't quite know how we would reshuffle as an alternative to that. But the point that you made about Labuschagne, I think, is important because we talked about accountability with the bat, or accountability from the first test, and maybe some players and a particular captain not taking any accountability for what happened in the first test. It actually looks like Marnus went back and got in the nets and absolutely, pounded the nets and made sure that he just kind of tinkered with one or two little things, because you don't want to change too many things technically, otherwise you completely throw yourself out. But the intent, the way that he sort of went about his business, and as you said, the way that he played the ball off his pads, I think was probably an indication of him finding a little bit of form. And I really liked the way that McSweeney went about his business. It was I know we hate the term moral victory, but that was a moral victory on the end of day one there when they got through that night, and then he was able to sort of get through and play into the next morning. I think that gives him a world of confidence heading into Brisbane.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sam Constas made another score for New South Wales over the weekend, 80-odd. And I think back to Khawaja, there might be a case now to make the tough call and just chop him off at the knees and say your test career's over, and bring in Sam Constas to open before this summer's out. So we'll see how Khawaja goes, but it's been concerning. I said before the game, I saw him in the nets, and to my amateur eye, he does look like he's just lost a fraction of a second of his sharpness. His movements used to be so fluid, and he's 38 now, and he seemed to be jumping into position a couple of times, which sort of indicates you're just a little bit slower than you were in the past. The other concern is Steve Smith. So hasn't scored any runs this season, and an unlucky dismissal caught down the leg side. Yeah, I still think Smith's got a lot of runs left in him, but maybe I'm wrong.
Khawaja, I think you may have a point. I think the thing technically that helped Khawaja is that in sort of like that final movement back and across, he actually brings his bat down and up. And I think now that, as you said, he's probably lost maybe a split second, that's actually too late for him now to adjust and play a shot. Whereas I think 2 summers ago, that actually helped him sort of time his movement and his trigger sort of either forward, across and forward, or back and across. Smith was a little bit unlucky. That first dismissal, I mean, when it kind of rains at pause, I think there's obviously still a really good player in there somewhere. And I think Brisbane will be a better indicator of how that all goes. Again, you don't want to read too much into pink ball stuff, and that might sound like a bit of a cop out, but I think there's just so many factors. I think for someone like Jasper Brumrah, it's actually the ball's actually swinging too far for Bumrah when it's a pink ball. Like, I think it actually took him out of the game a little bit more than bringing you back in the game, because it's all about those subtle movements and those subtle wrist positions that make Bumrah so good. Yes, he does move the red ball a lot, but when you put the pink ball in his hands, it's almost too much. I mean, we saw him sort of stray a few down the leg side, and Rishabh Pant was like outstretched to his left and couldn't get there a couple of times. So yeah, I think when you throw that all together, I think Khawaja, I think you're spot on. I think there is a little bit of pace there that he can't quite sort of play himself back up to again. And this is the summer where, you know, if he was to have a pretty barren run by the end of it, then there are probably questions. Not in Sri Lanka, because I don't think anyone's quick enough in Sri Lanka to really trouble him. And he's a decent player of spin in comparison to the rest of the Australian side. But yeah, I think there's a question for the Ashes next year. And, you know, if Australia is satisfied by their World Test Championship spot and they've already, you know, won the series by Sydney, is there scope for Sam Constance playing the 5th Test match in Sydney to maybe blood him in and look to get him ready for the Ashes next summer, and to have someone like Khawaja, you know, potentially give the game away by that point?
Absolutely. A champagne performance by Travis Head at home, his 8th Test century, and his 8th player of the match of the award. He is a match winner. Actually, back to what you said about Bumrah, I actually noticed that on the second morning he bowled better because the ball wasn't moving as much, and it was more troubling to the Aussie batters. But yeah, Head just a match winner. We know that. Mitch Marsh, disappointing dismissal, wasn't out and walked. That's one of the oddest things I've ever seen. I think his big win from this Test match is the fact that it finished on the 3rd morning, and Australia didn't have to bowl, but they bowled 80 overs in the whole Test match. Means 100%. That there's less of a push to bring in Bo Webster, I think, for the next Test match. Had Australia bowled a lot in this Test match, I think Webster might have come in. So I would imagine there won't be many changes unless Marsh really does pull up sore and he's struggling. But I think he'll retain his spot for the next Test match.
Yeah, and Marsh isn't the type of guy who will need to bowl a lot in the nets up to Brisbane anyway. I mean, and you only, in a perfect world, you only need him bowling maybe 20 overs in a match anyway. So
even 12 to 15 might be enough.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, we barely saw anything of Nathan Lyon in this particular Test, which is another win for us that you might want to talk about as well. But he'll be fresh for Brisbane, and he enjoys the bounce of Brisbane too, Nathan Lyon as well. So, yeah, I think that's the big win. It's actually the guys who didn't have to put their body through a terrible lot for us to take victory in the second Test.
Yeah, they've almost got a week. So the 3rd Test starts on Saturday in Brisbane. This game finished on Sunday, so they have a full 5 days off now to recover. They've given themselves an extra 2 days. I thought a lot about this, and I think Alex Carey needs to be more vocal in the field for the Australian team. He doesn't have to be sledging the opposition, but I just do believe there is not enough energy coming out of Carey as the wicketkeeper. It doesn't have to be abusive. It doesn't have to be sledging, but he is too quiet on the field. And I'm just going to say it. I think he's too quiet on the field. And I think, again, I'm sick of this. Oh, this is the way I play the game. The reason Australian cricket is successful is because we sort of have a good understanding of the game. And one of those things is your wicketkeeper is the heartbeat of the team. And Carey needed to realise that, especially with David Warner retiring, and step up. And I've heard it for both these first 2 Test matches. He's a fine cricketer, Carey, but you've got to push yourself, and you always want to be getting better. And I think he could just be more encouraging, more energetic, pepping the team up more. He's a bit like a mouse on the field, and I don't think it's good enough. And Inglis, if this series goes badly, I think Carey will get the axe, quite simply because he's just quiet.
There's talk of Inglis playing as a batter only as well. It's one of the few positions where we've actually got a real conversation as to who is the best player to fit in for the Test team, that keeper bat role. And yeah, when there's talk of Inglis also being a potential batter in the team too, it only, I think, fuels that fire. I didn't think too strongly about this point. It didn't really come up to me. I don't know if there's still sort of, maybe there's inhibitions after the whole Bairstow thing of the Ashes last year. I don't think there should be, but does he, as a keeper, I suppose he's not, yeah, you're right. He's not the stereotypical chirpy guy behind the stumps. You'd probably like to see a little bit more energy, but I don't think it's as much of a concern as some people probably think at this point. But it's definitely one to keep an eye on with, as you say, with Inglis around the traps as well. And he's on the hot seat as much as anyone else in this particular team right now. And that just might be something that sort of gives him an edge, as the team gets picked moving forward as well.
I mean, Carey dropped that catch off Siraj on day 3. Australia's fielding has been lackluster for a while now. And in the end, it's the keeper's job to lift those standards. I'm sorry, but, I'm not going to give Carey a free pass on this. I like him, but it's not good enough. And if Australia doesn't win this series, he will be in my target, because I don't like this arrogance of, I don't play the game like that. Well, good. Go and play for South Australia, then you can be as quiet as you want.
They haven't really got a lot to chirp up about down there a lot of the time anyway, do they? It could be where it stems from, in all honesty.
All right, so that's the Australian team, and that last Hazelwood Boland thing, I think we'll know pretty soon in the next couple of days. My gut feeling is they won't risk Hazelwood.
I agree. Yeah, I thought about that. I think I don't think you'd need to. And with that in mind, I don't think there's any point forcing him. And then I think there's a bigger conversation about Melbourne because of Boland, obviously at home. And
that's
all
true.
That as well.
Yeah. Maybe you rotate Cummins out and bring Boland in. Boland, Hazelwood, Stark. Love that. Anyway, all right, let's just quickly turn our attention to the Indian team. There's quite a bit of criticism for Sharma's captaincy. I do think it's hard to contain Travis Head, so I don't know exactly what he could have done. But Sharma's batting was a concern, although he did get an absolute cracker of a delivery from Cummins on the second evening. I mean, that would have got a lot of batters out. So I think a long way to go for Sharma. I think the thing that probably concerned India probably would be Harshit Rana. He really didn't perform very well in this test match, regressed after his performance in Perth. So maybe India will be looking at just changing the balance of their attack for the next test match at the Gabba, whether that's bringing in an Akash Deep or whether it's bringing in Jadeja and going Jadeja, Ashwin, Nitesh Kumar Reddy, and then Siraj and Bumrah. But you would imagine for the Gabba, they would lean more towards a third quick than an extra spinner.
Did I miss it? What's the prognosis around Mohammad Shami?
I don't think he'll be here for the Gabba. So Sharma said he's being monitored, but he did have some slight swelling in the knee after a domestic game. So they don't want to rush him back. I think if we see Shami, it'd be more that Boxing Day Sydney, because that's sort of over 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I don't. To be honest, I don't think they should race in to make too many changes. I'd like to think if I was India, you were kind of looking at what happened in Perth and using that as your blueprint for how you attack Brisbane, and you almost treat Adelaide as a bit of an anomaly. I think you're right in that Rana was a little bit disappointing, but I'm impressed enough by the way he's gone about his business, especially in Perth, that makes me think that he is a bigger trouble to Australia's batters than someone like Akash Deep might be. I have a couple of questions around Ashwin's performance. I know that the game was probably gone. He never really got a chance to really get into his work, but maybe in Brisbane he might enjoy that extra bounce. But he's not like a Nathan Lyon off spinner where he gets the ball to bowl a lot of overspin. He's very much a side spinny type of bowler as well. So I'm intrigued because, Washington Sundar's a slightly better bat and he can kind of chime in with some runs. I don't know what the conversation is going to be there. And I think the first point you made...
He played at the Gabba last time, Sundar, so he might come back in.
Yeah, of course. That's a good point. And I don't know, like the Sharma captaincy conversation is an intriguing one because, of course, you look at Perth and Bumrah wins as a test captain in Perth. And granted, it was probably more on the back of them just bowling so incredibly well and Australia bowling badly. But I'd love to be a fly on the wall, just hearing the conversations about sort of what goes on there, because Rohit Sharma came in. He looked a little bit lackadaisical with the bat as well. I know he got a good one, as you said, with that Cummins dismissal, but I mean, he's the type of guy that, he's obviously not the fittest and the sharpest and the biggest mover with his footwork. So maybe Adelaide's not a great test, particularly for him. But yeah, with him sort of down the order, that's kind of the indication that, they don't think that he's kind of what Rohit Sharma was of old as well. So that's a conversation that might sort of come from the end of the series rather than now. But I'm intrigued to hear what they have to say about his leadership and even his role in the team, because, it's hard not to just sit there and look at it and say, well, the game that you weren't here was the game that we won.
Yeah, I was quite impressed with Sharma throughout this game. His pre-match press conference, his post-match press conference. I do think he is a good leader for this team, but he'll need to perform better. And on that, so maybe Sundar comes in. I do think India would be wise to attack Australia's middle order with Jadeja and even Ashwin. I still think we're vulnerable to good spin. I think that if you ask Australia, they'd actually rather face India's third quick, whoever that is, than Jadeja or Ashwin. If I'm Mitch Marsh and I see Rana or even Akashdeep, I'm thinking, okay, I can get this guy. Whereas if it's Jadeja and Ashwin, there's a lot of scars there. Although the ball doesn't turn as much in Australia, I still think they're quality. And even on the Gabby, you said, it's Lions' best ground. Warren had great success. So Warren's best ground was the Gabba. Lions had good success there. Jadeja with his extra bounce, just, a hint of turn, he could be dangerous too. So, a lot of food for thought for India, but they're going into the second phase of this series in a pretty good position.
I think I'm with you. I think the left arm orthodox is a bit of a cheat code in every single format, and against the right-handers in particular in our team. I know that, obviously Khawaja and Head, you would think would probably enjoy facing Jadeja a bit more, but quite frankly, Travis Head's enjoyed facing everyone anyway. So what are you really losing out? Because, I mean, I can't see Jadeja going up against Usman Khawaja too much unless Khawaja's on 50 to 100. So I think it's a good point. I think, you'd probably take Jadeja taking on the Smiths, the Marnuses, and just asking them a different question, especially of Marnus and Marsh, and I suppose Carey as a left-hander is probably a little bit different as well. But from memory, Jadeja, I think, has bowled okay to Carey in previous series as well. So I'd probably be around that as well. And that's the thing about this India team. I mean, they've got 15, 16 guys who are genuinely world class. If they pick the right team, they can beat anyone in any conditions. It's just about making sure that particular player is on it and hot in that particular test match. I think by contrast, Australia have 11 or 12 good players, and we need to stick with that team. And if it all goes Pete Tong, then we're in trouble. But for India, it's like, oh, well, if someone doesn't make runs or if someone doesn't take wickets, there's a guy waiting and belting the door down to get in. And, to think that a team who loses a test match doesn't have Ravindra Jadeja in it is kind of ridiculous to think, but it's just the sort of position that India find themselves in.
Absolutely. So, a lot of questions going into this third test match. I cannot wait for it to start. I mean, this series is set up beautifully now, isn't it? After that result on the weekend, it's, you couldn't have asked for a better setup. And I think actually I can tell you there was a lot of relieved people from Cricket Australia that Australia won this game, because, had Australia gone down 2-0, it could have been pretty ugly and might have just got the knives out. Anyway, so that's the second test. Third test starts on Saturday. Anything else you want to bring up, Daniel, before we wrap this up?
No, I don't think so. I think we're all pretty concise. Just to say that I think Brisbane, the tensions could flare a little bit more. I think we've reached a point now where at 1-1 in the series, and India should still have their tails up after a bad performance in Adelaide. But look, they've got history in Brisbane, and I'm kind of hoping for their sake that they really harness that and try and make it a bit of a cauldron. I know they might not have the biggest kind of support up there in comparison to the rest of the cities around the country. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this one in particular. I think this is their best chance to, out of probably the next 3 test matches, to really gain something out of the series. Sydney maybe as well, but that there's always the weather caveat there.
And Boxing Day, they've done pretty well at the Boxing Day test on, I think it was their last couple of tours here. So anyway, lots to look forward to. I'm not traveling to the Brisbane test, so I'll be back to doing wraps from the comfort of my living room after play. Hopefully Daniel will be able to join me for one during the test match because I can't wait. Look, I won't have the drunks coming up and annoying me like I did afterwards on the second day. Yeah, just want to shout out friend of the show, Curtis Patterson. He made his first century in over 2 years of domestic cricket yesterday. I think he's 167 not out. And these are Curtis Patterson's scores since being, well, these are his last 6 scores. 167 not out, 99, 33, 71, 91, and 66. Curtis Patterson has a test century. He's only 31 years old. So I don't think anybody should write off Curtis Patterson's chances of making it back into the test side at some stage. Probably you'd be looking at after this World Test Championship cycle if he were to get a recall. But I think he's still got plenty of good cricket left in him. And it's a great story. He was axed by New South Wales, went back to grade cricket and scored runs there and then earned his recall the old-fashioned way. Beat the door down, and we're seeing him dominate first-class cricket. And it's interesting, a couple of weeks ago, Daniel, we were lamenting the lack of, batters knocking on the door. And since then, Patterson's got 6 scores in a row. Henry Hunt's hit his 3rd century of the Shield season. Sam Constance has made 100 in the PM's 11 game and another score. Matt Renshaw made 100. Bancroft made 100. So all of a sudden, there is a little bit of pressure being put on this batting lineup. There are options for the Australian selectors. And, this is the last Shield round before the Big Bash break. So perfect timing for Patterson. And if Australia does look at a rebuild and a reshuffle, then we might see Patterson get a look in. But, yeah, anyway, I just want to shout him out. Friend of the show. He was one of the first ever cricketers to come on, and great to see him doing well.
Yeah, big fan of him as well. Actually played a few junior rep games against him growing up, and the only way we could get him out is if we ran him out. So we've always kept a keen eye on Curtis Patterson, and watched obviously his test debut and everything that went with that against Sri Lanka. And good to see him sort of fight back, as you said, go all the way back to grade cricket and sort of punch his spot back in the New South Wales team through that way. It's good to see.
It is good to see. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. Remember, rate and review the show on your favorite app. Share the Spotify Wrapped if we appear in any of them. I'd love to see them. And remember, you get ad-free versions of the show on Patreon. The link is in the show notes. Daniel, where can the listeners keep up with you and the Emerging Cricket Podcast?
DG Beswick 1 across socials, and Emerging Cricket wherever you find your podcast as well. We've just dropped our weekly episode this week, wrapping some cricket basically in every other continent but Australia. So we're keeping it worldwide here, Menace.
Does Mongolia feature this time?
Not this week, no Asia sub-regionals to speak about. It'll be a little while before we hear from them again, I think, unfortunately.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everybody. I'll be back before the 3rd test.